Who the hell do you think you are blaming my son? I ought to crush that smart little mouth of yours before you even think of speaking another goddamn word." The sheriff roared, charging forward, ready to slap the small girl standing silently in the principal's office. But just then, the door swung open, and the man who stepped inside was none other than Chuck Norris. One look, one step, and the entire room fell dead silent. In that moment, everyone realized the girl they'd bullied all this time was the daughter of the undefeated legend Chuck Norris, and they had gone too far to turn back. If that hit you in the gut, drop a comment below. I want to hear what you think. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so you never miss a twist like this. And stick around, because what happens next, you won't see it coming. The sky over Bellwood was a washed-out gray, the kind that never looked like it could hold rain, but somehow still felt heavy. A slow breeze moved through the dry weeds along the roadside as the old Honda Civic pulled into the narrow driveway of a blue house with peeling paint and a porch swing that tilted slightly off balance. "That's it," her mother said quietly, like maybe if she whispered it, it would sound better. Her hands rested gently on the steering wheel, unmoving eyes fixed on the front door. "Your grandfather's old place looks smaller than I remember." Kayla didn't answer. She simply opened the door and stepped outside. Her shoes crunched against the gravel. There was no sound from the neighborhood, just a dog barking faintly down the block, and the hum of cicadas coming alive as the day settled into evening. The girl stood still for a moment, dark hair pulled back, tight shoulders set. Her backpack was plain and clean, no keychains, no stickers. She didn't glance around, she didn't speak, and yet even as she walked toward the house, she could feel them neighbors behind curtains, shapes moving behind glass, their eyes on her. The Norris girl. They didn't know much, just the name. Inside the house smelled of mothballs, dust, and old cedar. Kayla walked through the living room with slow, steady steps. On the hallway wall, a crooked frame showed a faded photograph. She reached up and adjusted the frame. The silence of the house swallowed the click of the frame against the wall. That night, while her mother unpacked in the bedroom, Kayla lay on a thin mattress on the floor of her room, listening to the wind push against the loose pane in the window. Her eyes didn't close right away. She stared at the ceiling, hands folded over her stomach. She didn't cry. She hadn't cried in a long time. The next morning came in gray again. Bellwood High wasn't a large school, but it was the kind that wore its traditions on its sleeve. The American flag out front was faded, the bricks worn, and the students moving through the front gate already clustered in small, safe packs. Kayla walked alone. She wore the school's standard navy skirt, white blouse, a blazer that sat too neatly on her frame. Her braid was tight, her shoes polished. As she moved past the others, voices dropped. Some turned to look. Some didn't bother to hide it. "New girl, huh?" one boy muttered. "Norris," a girl said loud enough for others to hear. "Is she like Chuck Norris's kid or something? What's next? She's gonna roundhouse kick the flagpole." The laughter started small, then rolled wider. Kayla didn't stop. She found her locker and opened it. Her combination worked on the first try. She placed her books inside, closed it, and walked toward her homeroom without once looking over her shoulder. She sat in the second row, third desk from the left. "Yo, ninja girl," someone said as they passed. "Hey, what's up, sensei? Got any black belts in your backpack?" They thought it was clever, fresh blood in the water. Kayla didn't answer. It only made it worse. By the end of the day, the nickname had evolved. From Chuck Norris girl to ninja girl to cowgirl, no emotion. A caricature built on silence. She became a walking target simply by not joining in. The second day, someone placed a rubber shuriken on her desk before class. A joke. When she returned from the restroom, it was there. No one claimed it. No one even looked her way. She picked it up and put it in her bag. Later that week, they upped their game. She was in line at the cafeteria when Trayson Brower made his first real move. He wasn't loud. He didn't need to be. Tall, blonde, clean-cut captain of the football team, son of the sheriff. He was the type who never had to shout to be heard. He stepped in front of her tray in hand, looked down over his shoulder and said, "Don't suppose Chuck taught you how to stand in line with normal people?" She stared at the back of his head, unmoving. When she didn't respond, he added without turning, "Or maybe you don't speak American." Laughter. Some girls behind him giggled. Kayla stepped back without a word and left the line. The next day, her locker was covered in sticky notes. Dozens. All red, all blank, except one in the middle. Written in Sharpie, "Go back to the dojo, China doll." She took a deep breath, peeled off every note, folded them, stacked them, and dropped them in the trash. Then she walked to class like nothing had happened. But the worst came on Friday. It was during lunch. The sun was high, the courtyard noisy. Kayla was at her usual spot beneath the oak tree, alone, unbothered, uninvited. Trayson walked past with his tray full of sloppy joes, corn, and applesauce. He stopped in front of her, leaned slightly forward. "You know," he said, "I don't think you've said one word since Monday. That ain't normal, you know that, right?" She didn't respond. She opened her bento box slowly, neatly. He looked at the food. "The hell is that? Smells like fish tank puke." Then he flipped his tray. The contents splashed across her lap, grease sauce and all. People froze. For a long second, Kayla didn't move. Her hands remained on the bento box. Her face gave nothing. She slowly stood up, brushed off a piece of bread that had stuck to her thigh, picked up the container and walked away. No words. Not one. She didn't cry. Later that night, long after her mother had gone to sleep, Kayla stepped out the back door. The air was cool. The stars were dim. She walked barefoot to the small square of concrete that used to be her grandfather's garden patio. In the corner, she unrolled a rubber mat cracked at the edges, stained in the middle. She stood in the center, closed her eyes, and inhaled deeply. Then she moved. Not fast, not sharp, not angry. Slow, controlled motions. The turn of a wrist, the pivot of a hip, footwork that barely made a sound. She was not fighting. She was remembering. Every breath, every shift, every stance learned from a father who spoke more with silence than with instruction. A man who taught that the loudest person in the room was often the weakest. That stillness was power. That emotion unchecked was a weapon turned inward. She practiced until sweat soaked the collar of her shirt and her legs ached. Then she bowed gently to the empty space before her and walked back into the house. Inside, the TV flickered quietly in the living room. An old movie her mother must have left on. A man on screen moved through 6 opponents with grace, not rage. His eyes calm, his fists unhurried. She sat on the floor watching. The next day would come same as the last, and maybe the cruelty wouldn't stop. By morning, the wind had shifted. The air felt brittle, and the halls of Bellwood High, already dry and tight with tension, seemed just a little thinner than yesterday. From the minute Kayla stepped onto campus, the shift in energy was subtle but sharp. Word had spread. Not about what she did last night, or the fact that Trayson's lunch had ended up in her lap, but about the fact that she hadn't cried. Not a tear. Not even a flinch. That bothered them more than anything. No one likes silence they can't interpret. By second period, the whispering had grown. Girls would turn to each other and cover their mouths, laughing behind painted nails. Boys bumped into her in the hallway and acted like it was an accident, brushing past her shoulder with a little more force than necessary. The first time it happened, she let it go. By the third time, she stepped aside a half-second early. She didn't give them the satisfaction. At lunch, she found a quiet spot near the far edge of the field behind the bleachers. She sat with her food, a neat little box of rice-grilled fish and steamed greens her mom had packed with care. "Hey, Norris." She didn't look up. "You still eating that science experiment your mama makes?" Kayla lifted a piece of fish with her chopsticks calmly and put it in her mouth. The voice came again, closer this time. "What is that cat meat?" More laughter, more feet scraping in the grass. She didn't respond. They didn't like that either. That week, someone started leaving notes in her locker. First, it was simple "mute girl" scribbled in pen on a torn scrap of notebook paper. Then more elaborate. One was folded like a fortune cookie, and when she opened it, the inside read, "Bet your daddy broke your mouth, huh?" She read it, folded it again, and put it in her pocket. When she got home, she didn't tell her mom, just went out back, rolled out the mat, and practiced her forms beneath the evening sky. The wind tugged at her braid as she moved, and somewhere far off, a dog barked into the dark. The next day, the locker door had been dented. Someone had kicked it in. When she opened it, her books were scattered, her lunchbox missing. In its place was a single slice of bologna smeared with something green. She quietly picked it up with a tissue and threw it away. Trayson watched it all unfold. He never participated directly in these smaller things, but his presence lingered, like he gave silent permission. He'd lean against the locker's, arms crossed, while his buddies circled, waiting for her to crack. But she never cracked. She just got quieter, more precise. By Friday, things escalated. It was during gym class. The sky was cloudless and bright, and the sun burned through every patch of skin that wasn't covered by the school's gray PE uniform. Coach Davis was barely paying attention, too busy shouting at the boys to run faster on the track. They were supposed to be doing relays, but Trayson had other plans. He leaned in to whisper something to the girl next to him, one of the cheerleaders, bright smile, cruel eyes. Then he jogged up to Kayla as the class lined up on the grass. "You ever done a trust fall, cowgirl?" he asked, loud enough for a few others to hear. Kayla didn't answer. "Well, guess what, you're about to." He gave her a light shove, just enough to make her step forward. And then the moment happened. She was moving down the line when someone, maybe by Trayson's silent signal, stuck out a leg. She didn't see it. She tripped. Hard. Her knee hit the grass first, then her elbow scraped along the dirt. Her palm jammed under her. Laughter erupted around her. Not just a few kids, but a whole pack of them. Coach Davis didn't say a word. He looked up, saw her on the ground, and then turned back to his whistle. Kayla pushed herself up slowly. She didn't speak, didn't scan the crowd, just stood and dusted herself off. There was a fresh scratch across her palm, blood beading. She kept her eyes forward, walked back to her place in line. And that silence, her refusal to even look at them, landed harder than any scream could have. After class, she washed the scrape under cold water, wrapped it with paper towels, and went to her next class like nothing happened. But something had changed. Her eyes were sharper now, less tired, less patient. That weekend, Trayson decided he was done playing. There was a math exam on Monday. Big one. 30% of the semester grade. Kayla, of course, sat near the front. Always quiet. Always focused. She never looked around. Never whispered. Never cheated. Which made her the perfect target. During second period, Trayson slipped a vial into someone's hand. One of the quieter boys. Thin. Nervous. Always one step behind everyone else. "You want me to stop messing with you, Bam?" Trayson said, voice low. "Do this. That's all." Bam nodded. During the exam, the classroom was silent, except for the scratch of pencils. Kayla leaned over her paper. Bam sat 2 seats behind her. No one noticed him move forward, just slightly. As he passed her desk pretending to pick up a fallen eraser, he brushed against her neck. A quick dab from a cotton swab laced with something she wouldn't even recognize. She blinked. Once. Twice. The numbers on the page swam. Her breathing hitched. A cold sweat broke along her scalp. But then, she raised her hand and slapped her own face. Hard. The sound snapped across the room. Everyone froze. Then she did it again. "Are you all right?" the teacher asked, startled. Kayla nodded, eyes wide but clearing. "I'm fine," she said. Her voice was quiet but steady. She bent over her test again and kept going. 30 minutes later, she handed it in and left the room. She didn't look at Bam, didn't look at Trayson, just walked out. But she didn't go to her next class. She remembered the brush against her neck just a second too long. She hadn't thought much of it at first. But now, standing there alone in the echoing corridor, it came back sharp. Bam! He was always nervous, always small in the room. But that morning, he hadn't been just quiet. He'd been tense, avoiding her eyes. And then suddenly beside her desk, the eraser, the little pause, the cottony touch. And Trayson had smiled too wide when she came back from nearly passing out. Like he knew she'd get through it but hoped maybe that she wouldn't. It wasn't the prank kind of smile. It was measured, expectant. Like a man setting a trap and waiting to see if the animal walks into it. She closed her eyes for a moment. This wasn't a joke anymore. It never really had been. And now she was sure Trayson was behind it. 10 minutes later, Trayson came down the hall with his usual swagger, laughing with a group of boys. She stepped into his path. He slowed. "Well, well, if it ain't Sensei Silent." Kayla looked up, her gaze flat and cold. Then she spoke clear and even. "After school. Out back." Trayson tilted his head, eyebrows up. "You serious? You wanted my attention," she said. "Now you have it." And then she turned and walked away, her back straight, shoulders still. Behind her, Trayson laughed, but his voice cracked. Just a little. The hallway was quiet by the time she reached her locker again. Her books were there untouched. No more sticky notes, no sandwich meat, no slurs scratched into the metal. Just silence. But Kayla knew better than to think it meant anything had changed. The quiet wasn't peace. It was the kind of stillness you get before a dust storm. Everything in place for now, but waiting for something to blow it all wide open. She opened her locker, grabbed her math book, and shut the door slowly. Her palm still throbbed where she'd slapped herself earlier. She rolled her fingers once, checking her grip. Then she took a long breath and headed for class, not because she cared about the lecture, but because showing up mattered more than they knew. When the last bell rang, she didn't pack up quickly. She waited, let the others filter out first. Then she tied her hair tighter, adjusted her sleeves, and walked to the back of the school like she had somewhere specific to be, which she did. Behind Bellwood High, past the parking lot and the dumpsters, was a stretch of cracked blacktop ringed by weeds and chain link. It was where kids smoked skip detention or settled scores. This was the meeting place. When she turned the corner, they were already there. A dozen kids, maybe more, leaning on cars, sitting on railings, phones in hand, all of them waiting for the show. Trayson stood near the center, arms crossed, grinning like a boy who thought he was in control. He wore his varsity jacket like a badge, his sneakers new and bright against the scuffed asphalt. Kayla walked up slow, her steps quiet but steady. She stopped a few paces from him, facing him, square chin level. No words, just presence. The crowd murmured. Someone chuckled. Phones were lifted. You could feel the tension building like summer heat. Trayson stepped forward. "Didn't think you'd actually show," he said. Kayla didn't reply. He circled her once slow, casual, trying to get a reaction. When he came around to face her again, he lifted both fists and danced back on his heels like a boxer. "All right, let's do this, Miss Karate Kid." She didn't move. He came at her fast, faster than expected. Most kids, when they wanted to intimidate, they hesitated first. Not him. Trayson lunged with a full-force punch aimed square at her shoulder. She stepped to the side, smooth as breath. His arm sailed past. Before he could turn, she caught his wrist, twisted her hips, and used his momentum to spin him off balance. 1 second, he was upright. The next, he was on the ground flat on his back, staring up at the gray sky. 3 moves. That was it. She let go and stepped back. The whole crowd went quiet. Just the sound of gravel settling and the faint buzz of a nearby transformer. Trayson scrambled to his feet, red-faced, teeth clenched. He swung again, sloppier this time, wild with embarrassment. She ducked under the swing, caught his elbow, and guided him down again, gentler this time, like correcting a child. Someone in the crowd laughed. Not at her. At him. That changed the tone. He rolled onto his side, chest, heaving, glaring at her like she'd stolen something from him. "You done?" she asked. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried. He didn't answer. She turned and walked away. Behind her, no one said a word. A few phones were still up. Most were lowered. The silence wasn't the same as before. It had weight now. It followed her through the parking lot, across the sidewalk, and all the way home. Even inside the house with the door closed and the windows shut, it stuck to her like a shadow. Her mom was still at work. The living room was dim, the light outside turning gold with early evening. She changed out of her uniform, tied her hair back again, and stepped outside. In the backyard, the same square of worn concrete waited. The mat curled at the corners, lay where she'd left it. She knelt at the edge, adjusted its position, and smoothed out a fold in silence. Then she stood, hands loose, feet shoulder-width apart, and began to move. No rush, no sharpness, just form and breath, breath and balance. She practiced for 30 minutes straight. No breaks, no second guessing. She moved like someone who wasn't training for a fight, but for a way to stay still when the world tried to shake her loose. When she finished, she bowed to the space in front of her. Then she rolled up the mat, dusted off her knees, and went inside. Her mother was home by then. She stood in the kitchen, sorting groceries, humming under her breath. "You okay?" she asked without turning. Kayla paused. "Yeah," she said. Her mother looked over her shoulder, eyes searching. Then she nodded and went back to putting cans in the cupboard. That night, Kayla lay in bed staring at the ceiling again. Her hands were sore. Her legs ached. but her mind still. By the next morning, the video had made the rounds. At first, it showed up on a private group chat, then on someone's Instagram story. By third period, it had been reshared 100 times. The caption varied, but the clip was always the same. Trayson swinging, Kayla sidestepping, Trayson hitting the ground. Twice. By lunch, the whispers had changed. People weren't laughing anymore. They stared, not with cruelty, but with curiosity, like they were seeing her for the first time. Some avoided her altogether, eyes down when she passed. Others watched her walk the hallway like they expected her to explode. But she didn't. She walked like she always had, steady, quiet, alone. At her locker, a few boys stepped aside without being asked. In class, the girl who once mimicked her voice now sat 2 rows back and didn't say a word. Trayson didn't show up at all. He was sick, someone said. But everyone knew better. Kayla didn't gloat. She didn't smile. She just folded her hands on her desk and listened to the lesson. That afternoon, she came home, made tea for her mother, then washed her uniform. She scrubbed the cuffs with a soft brush, careful not to stretch the fabric. Then she hung it up to dry. Routine mattered. Discipline mattered. Not because it made her stronger, but because it kept her from becoming like them. That night, after her mom had gone to bed, she stepped back out onto the mat. And she trained. Not for the next fight, but for the one inside her, the one that asked when they come again, and they will. Who do you want to be? The next morning started like any other. Kayla sat at the kitchen table with a half-eaten bowl of oatmeal in front of her. Her mom stood by the sink pouring coffee, quiet as usual. There was a kind of peace in the room, but it felt like the stillness before thunder, one of those heavy silences that didn't feel like it would last. Her mother glanced at her once as if sensing something, but said nothing. At school, the sky stayed gray. Clouds hung low. The hallways were buzzing as usual, but not in a good way. There was a hush behind the noise, a sort of quiet people made when they were waiting for something to drop. Kayla sat in third period history, eyes on her notes, only half hearing the teacher's voice. She was writing slowly, deliberately, each letter neat and even. Then the static popped through the intercom, loud and sudden. Everyone in the room stopped what they were doing. The speaker cracked once, then the front office secretary's voice came through, thin, clipped, and polite like always. Kayla Norris, please report to the principal's office. Kayla Norris to the front office. Thank you. Heads turned. One boy snorted. The teacher looked at her with a face caught between concern and curiosity. Kayla capped her pen, closed her notebook, and stood. Her chair scraped the floor a little too loud. She didn't look at anyone as she walked out. Her steps were steady, but inside her chest tightened. She'd expected this. After everything. 15 minutes later, she sat in a hard chair outside the principal's office, her back straight, her hands folded in her lap. The secretary avoided eye contact. Teachers passed by without speaking. The silence in the front office was thick, like they all knew something was coming but didn't want to be part of it. Then the door opened. Kayla, the principal said, peeking out. Come on in. She entered slowly. Inside were 4 people already seated. To her right sat the principal and vice principal Kenner. Across from them were Trayson's mother and father, Sheriff Brower himself, his face hard and unreadable. His hands folded, resting on the table knuckles, slightly white. The air was warm, not from temperature but from pressure. The principal cleared his throat. Kayla, we've asked you here today because of a very serious matter. Your actions behind the school, witnessed by several students, have raised concerns. Kayla didn't speak. She watched him quietly. Sheriff Brower didn't wait. He leaned forward, pointing a thick finger at her. She assaulted my son in broad daylight, like an animal. I want her expelled, arrested if need be. You can't let this little thug get away with this. Trayson said nothing. His arms were crossed, his expression tight. Vice Principal Kenner tried to calm things down. Let's all be respectful. We're here to understand what really happened. I'll tell you what happened, Brower snapped. My boy, who has never been in trouble by the way, was humiliated, and now she's spreading lies about drugs. Really, you're gonna sit here and entertain that garbage? The principal shifted awkwardly. Sheriff Brower, we haven't made any decisions yet. You should have made one already, the sheriff barked. He slammed a hand on the table. You letting this girl tear apart my son's name and reputation, and she's lying. Kayla didn't blink. Sheriff Brower's voice dropped an octave. Matter of fact, maybe I ought to give her a real reason to be scared. He stood up, hard. His hands clenched at his sides as he took a step toward Kayla, face twisted with rage. You better shut that smart mouth before someone teaches you how to respect. And that's when the door opened. Chuck Norris stepped into the room. He didn't raise his voice, didn't move fast, just walked in calm and quiet like the wind blowing through dry leaves. Everyone froze. The principal looked like someone had unplugged him. Vice Principal Kenner stood halfway from his seat before sitting back down, unsure what to do with his hands. Trayson's eyes widened. Kayla turned eyes round. She whispered, breath-catching. Dad Chuck looked at her, gave a nod, and then fixed his gaze on the sheriff. You were about to hit my daughter. Brower straightened, caught mid-motion. I know. I was just... Chuck walked farther into the room, calm but firm. You don't raise your hand at a girl like her. You don't raise your hand at my daughter. Ever. The room was dead silent. Sheriff Brower's jaw worked, but no words came out. Trayson shrank further into his chair. Chuck stepped beside Kayla, placed a hand gently on her shoulder, and looked at the principal. I think there's something you all need to see. He reached into his jacket and set a USB flash drive on the desk. Kenner, with trembling hands, picked it up and plugged it into the laptop. The video opened. It showed Bam brushing something against Kayla's neck during the test. The quality was grainy, but the action was clear. The teacher's back was turned, the class unaware, and Trayson in the background watching it all with a smirk. Gasps filled the room. Chuck folded his arms. That's fentanyl. You let it get used in your school. The sheriff exploded. That proves nothing. My son ain't never had drugs. That's some junk you cooked up. He yanked Trayson's backpack from under the table. You want to see what he's got? He unzipped the bag with one motion, dumped it out onto the desk. Books, pencils, and notebooks spilled out. See nothing. Not a damn thing. He turned on Kayla. You think this makes you something coming in here with your washed-up old man and cooked-up videos? You're nothing but a mouthy little fraud with a daddy complex. Just like the movies, huh? Pick a fight and play victim. Kayla smiled. Not big, just a small cold curl at the edge of her mouth. She stood up slowly. Then she reached across the principal's desk and picked up a box cutter used for opening supply shipments. The sound of the blade sliding out was soft, but sharp. The sheriff flinched. He stepped in front of his son instinctively. Don't you dare! He pointed a finger at her, voice cracking. You try anything, I swear to God. But Kayla didn't move toward him. She looked over his shoulder, her eyes landing on Trayson, who had gone pale. Then she stepped around them both, calm, quiet. She bent, picked up Trayson's backpack again, no words, and gently turned it over. Let me help, she said. With the precision of someone used to cutting clean lines, she sliced along the inner seam at the base. One quick pull, a soft rip, and from the split lining a small white plastic container tumbled out, clattering against the floor. The room froze. Chuck raised his chin. Kayla picked it up, turned it slowly in her fingers, and placed it on the principal's desk. She looked directly at the sheriff. "Maybe this is the thing you were looking for." The silence that followed was long and cold. Brower turned slowly to face his son. "Trayson." Trayson's mouth opened. No sound. Just a sputter, then nothing. Brower stared at him, eyes wild. "You brought that into my house." Trayson tried to speak again. Couldn't. Chuck rested both hands on the desk. "You were saying something about my daughter's mouth earlier." The principal stood slowly, shoulders stiff. "Effective immediately, Trayson Brower is suspended pending expulsion and a full investigation." The sheriff didn't speak, didn't argue. Chuck kept a hand lightly on Kayla's shoulder as they stepped out of the office and into the hallway. She walked beside him in silence, glancing up at him now and then, but not saying a word. Her feet felt steady, but her chest still carried the weight of what had happened, what almost happened. Out in the parking lot, the late morning sun hung low and warm, cutting long shadows across the pavement. Chuck headed straight for the truck. Kayla followed a few steps behind. Halfway there, he stopped walking. She froze, unsure why. He turned around slowly and looked at her, not stern, not cold, just serious in that unmistakable Chuck Norris way that felt more like a quiet storm than a thunderclap. "You ain't got nothing to say to me?" he asked. Kayla swallowed. Her voice came out small. "I didn't do anything wrong." He raised an eyebrow. "That what you think I'm upset about?" She looked down at her shoes, her words stuck somewhere between her ribs and her throat. Chuck's voice sharpened just a little. "I'm not mad you fought back. I'm mad you took all that and never told a soul. If I hadn't seen that video, you were just gonna carry that by yourself, huh?" She looked up, eyes wide, blinking. "You think I'd let you walk through this world without someone to stand behind you, without someone to call it out when folks treat you like dirt?" Her shoulders relaxed, then as if 100 pounds dropped from her all at once. "You're not mad at me," Chuck scoffed. "You really think I'm gonna see my kid stand her ground like that and be mad?" She smiled, the first real smile in days. "How'd you even find out?" Chuck opened the truck door and grinned. "You really think I wasn't gonna see the most viral video in Texas about a girl flipping the sheriff's kid in 3 seconds flat?" She laughed under her breath. "Figured you were off grid like usual." He chuckled. "I was. Till someone sent it to me. 6 people, actually. One of them was a veteran I trained back in '94. Said, 'Sir, I think this one's yours.'" She shook her head. "Figures." He stepped aside to let her climb into the passenger seat. As they buckled in, he added casually, "By the way, good form on the throw. Real clean." She glanced at him. "Seriously?" "But," he said, holding up a finger, "your stance was a little soft. Could have used more ground pressure. Your base was about an inch too narrow." Kayla rolled her eyes. "I knew you'd say that." He gave her a wink. "Still proud of you." When they pulled into the driveway at home, the porch light was still off. The place looked just like it had when Chuck left it last year, weathered, quiet, and still. The screen door creaked when Kayla opened it. Her mom answered the knock. The look on her face when she saw Chuck standing beside their daughter said it all. "Chuck?" she asked, blinking, one hand still holding a kitchen towel. "Hey, darlin'," he said with a gentle nod. "Thought I'd swing through, maybe stay a few days." Kayla's mom looked from him to her daughter. "Is something wrong?" Kayla gave a tiny shake of her head. Chuck added smoothly, "Just wanted to check in. Rest up a little. No big deal." She narrowed her eyes at both of them. "You two hiding something?" Kayla shrugged. "We agreed not to worry you. Dad's just here to decompress." Her mother gave them that knowing mom look, but she didn't press it. Instead, she stepped aside and let them in. "You know where the guest blanket is?" That night, the house stayed quiet, but across town, things were heating up. By morning, Sheriff Brower had made his move. He called a press conference on the steps of the Bellwood County Courthouse. Local news crews lined up as he stood behind a podium with the American flag behind him, flanked by his wife and 2 deputies. "The events surrounding my son have been twisted into something ugly and false," he said, voice hard and public. "There is a coordinated effort to discredit my family. The student in question, Chuck Norris, is not just physically aggressive but manipulative, using her father's name to strike fear and gain sympathy." Kayla saw it all unfold on the evening news. Her mother gasped when she saw Brower's face. "He's still pushing this," she whispered. The school board met that same night under pressure. Less than 24 hours after the truth had come out, Kayla received a letter at her doorstep, "Indefinite suspension pending further review of conduct." It didn't matter that she was the victim. Didn't matter that video and evidence had cleared her. What mattered was power, and Brower still had some left. Chuck read the letter silently, jaw clenched. He folded it slowly, laid it on the table, and said nothing for a long time. Kayla stared down at her lap. She didn't cry, she didn't speak, but her hands were clenched tight. 2 days passed. Kayla filled her time at the local martial arts center. It wasn't fancy, just a converted tool shed behind the VFW hall with rubber flooring and 2 worn punching bags. But the owner, Miss June, a black belt in her 50s with short gray hair and a voice like gravel, let Kayla train there in the evenings. "Folks say you got famous," Miss June said, adjusting her knee brace one night. "I didn't ask for it," Kayla said. "Good," June replied. "Means you might actually deserve it." Most nights Kayla trained alone. Shadow drills, breathing work, elbow control and wrist redirection, quiet, sharp, repeatable. She was in the middle of one of those solo drills when Miss June poked her head in. "Your dad's running late tonight." Kayla paused, wiped her forehead with a towel. "He's visiting an old friend. Said he'd pick me up around 9. June nodded. "Well, don't hang out too long. This town's been feeling strange lately." Kayla smiled politely. She didn't say it out loud, but she felt it too. That same evening, as the sun dipped low and the street lights started flickering on, Kayla stepped outside the training center with her bag slung over her shoulder. The parking lot was mostly empty. A warm breeze rattled the loose signs on the old fence nearby. She heard it before she saw him. Footsteps. Fast. Heavy. She turned just in time to see Sheriff Brower coming from between 2 parked cars, a metal baton already half raised in his hand. "You think this is over?" he growled. Kayla's breath caught, but she didn't freeze. She didn't scream. She dropped her bag. In 3 fluid movements, sidestep, arm, catch, pivot, she locked his elbow, redirected his force, and slammed him down onto the pavement. His baton clattered away. He grunted hard, tried to twist up. She pinned him easily, one knee to his shoulder, one hand on the back of his wrist. The look in his eyes wasn't rage anymore. It was fear. "You're crazy," he hissed. "You'll pay for this." Kayla said nothing. Then she heard a voice from behind. "You got that on camera." It was a man older holding up a cell phone, one of the bar patrons from next door. "Whole thing," he added, "from the second he came at you." Kayla stepped back, slowly, let Brower scramble to his feet. The man came closer. "You all right, young lady?" She nodded. "Didn't look like you were the one causing trouble," he added. By the next morning, the footage was everywhere. This time, the town didn't stay silent. The mayor called an emergency meeting. Brower was suspended without pay within 24 hours, then formally charged with assault on a minor. News vans returned to Bellwood. But this time, it wasn't about gossip or rumors. It was about accountability. It was about a girl who stood her ground and didn't lose herself. The suspension was lifted 3 days later. Principal Whitley called personally. He sounded tired. "You'll be welcomed back Monday. And, on behalf of the board, we apologize." Kayla simply said, "Okay." When Monday came, Kayla walked through the school gates alone. But it didn't feel the same. No one stared the way they used to. No whispers. No laughter. Just quiet. Respectful. Different. She passed students who once mocked her. Some looked down. Some nodded. A few gave her a pat on the shoulder without saying a word. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. Kayla had been back at school for nearly 3 weeks when the tide started to shift again. At first, things were quiet. Not in the uneasy, waiting for the storm way they had been before, but more like the way early fall feels cooler, steadier, and cautious. Most students gave her space. Teachers treated her with more attention, sometimes too much. The ones who used to avoid her now nodded politely in the hall. Even a few parents, when picking up their kids after school, waved at her from across the parking lot. But under that surface, not everyone had changed. In town, opinions had split. There were folks who stood up at church meetings or PTA potlucks and said Kayla had done what anyone with sense would have done. They praised her for holding her ground, for not breaking when most adults would have. But there were others, quieter but no less sharp, who said different. "She's dangerous. She's been trained to hurt people since she was little. She's Chuck Norris's daughter. What do you expect?" And with the news gone and the sheriff out of office, some of those whispers had started creeping back into school, passed like notes in a math class. No one said anything to her face. They didn't dare. But she heard things. And she felt the difference. At lunch, a few students still sat at her table, especially some of the younger girls who'd started joining her Still Point group. But other tables cleared when she walked past. Teachers asked her more questions than necessary. One counselor even pulled her aside and asked if she'd considered online schooling. "It might be more comfortable for someone like you," she'd said gently. Kayla hadn't answered. Just looked her in the eye and waited until the silence made the woman fidget. Chuck didn't talk much about the headlines or the school chatter. He stayed out of the news, out of sight, but close. He picked Kayla up most afternoons, even when she said she didn't need it. He cooked dinner some nights when her mom worked late, and he sat on the back porch after dark, watching the wind roll through the oak trees like something he could track. "Let 'em talk," he said one night, sipping weak coffee from a chipped mug. "They're not your fight." Kayla sat next to him, arms crossed. "Feels like they want one anyway." He didn't answer that right away, just stared out at the backyard. Finally, he said, "They're afraid of what they don't control. Not your fault." She nodded slowly. "I just hate being watched all the time," she said. Chuck gave her a look. "Then stop doing stuff worth watching." Kayla smiled. "I'm not sure I know how." He nodded once, as if that made sense. It wasn't long before something new stirred. A group of upperclassmen kids with family names tied to judges, lawyers, Land developers started eyeing her sideways. They weren't the kind to shout insults or pick fights out in the open. They were quieter, smarter, and they understood something the others hadn't. Kayla wasn't just strong. She was becoming influential. That made her dangerous in a different way. And so they planned. They came to one of her still point sessions, phones tucked neatly in their backpacks, smiles pasted on like party masks. They asked questions, took part in the drills, applauded when a girl half Kayla's size learned how to shift her weight just right to break a wrist lock, and all the while one of them kept filming. They waited 2 days. Then they uploaded a cut-up version of the training. No context, no voiceover, just shaky footage of Kayla leading teens in what looked like aggressive takedowns and throws. They slowed the video, added harsh filters, inserted ominous music. The caption read, "Militant School Club, our teens being trained to fight back against authority." Within hours, it was spreading online. Again. Kayla found out about it from a student in the Still Point group, a small girl with glasses and braces who handed her a phone without saying anything. Kayla watched it once. Then she watched it again. Then she handed the phone back and went to class. She didn't say a word about it all day. That night, she went home, sat down at the kitchen table, and opened her laptop. She attached the full, unedited footage of the training, the voices, the lessons, the clear message of restraint and control, and she sent it in a single email to Principal Whitley with one line, "Do you believe in truth, or do you believe in who knows how to edit better?" She didn't copy her father, didn't tag the press. She waited. The next day, the school board issued a public statement. There is no evidence that the Still Point group at Bellwood High promotes violence. The club, under the guidance of Chuck Norris, is a peer-led space focused on personal confidence, conflict resolution, and non-aggressive self-defense. The recent videos circulating are misleading and manipulative. It was read during morning announcements, and when it ended, the whole class went quiet. Kayla didn't speak. She didn't smirk. She just returned to her notebook and kept writing. That afternoon during Still Point, she stood in front of the circle and looked around at the faces, some scared, some angry, some confused. "People are going to say what they want," she said. "But that doesn't make it true." She paused, let the quiet settle. "Silence doesn't mean weakness. It's strength when you choose it for the right reason." No one moved. Kayla bent, picked up a practice pad, and tossed it to one of the boys. "Now let's learn how to fall without losing who we are." Time passed. The rest of the year rolled toward its end, carrying all the usual rituals: finals, yearbook signings, last lunches under old trees. Most students went back to worrying about tests and dates and what to wear to senior night. Kayla stayed focused. She helped others prepare for their own transitions. She answered questions, coached techniques, and listened more than she spoke. She turned down interviews, avoided cameras, declined offers from out-of-town programs wanting to highlight her story. She just showed up, trained, and went home. One afternoon, Principal Whitley called her into his office again. She walked in quiet and ready. He smiled kindly this time. "We're holding a recognition event for students who made a difference." She nodded once. "You're nominated for Student of Exceptional Inspiration." She waited. "We'd like you to give a short speech. Doesn't have to be long." Kayla paused, then shook her head gently. "I don't need a microphone," she said. "I just need to keep standing." He nodded. "Then we'll respect that." Graduation week came, and with it the biggest assembly Bellwood High had held in years. Parents filled the rows. Teachers wore suits they hadn't touched in seasons. Banners hung in the gym, blue and white and proud. Kayla sat near the back with her group. When her name was called, she stood. The applause was steady, respectful, not over the top. She walked across the stage with a calm step. The announcer's voice filled the hall. In recognition of her grace under pressure, her silent strength, and her example of justice without vengeance, we are proud to name our new athletic wing the Chuck Norris Center for Silent Strength and Justice. A collective hush fell over the room, then a long, slow wave of applause, the kind that builds not from excitement, but from understanding. Kayla nodded once as the principal accepted the certificate and turned to walk off the stage. No speeches, no headlines, just her, being. You know, after going through Kayla's story, if there's one thing that sticks with me, it's this: silence is not weakness. In a world that often rewards loud voices and flashy reactions, Kayla reminded us that quiet strength, the kind that comes from discipline, self-control, and knowing who you are, that's the kind that changes everything. This wasn't just a story about bullying or a fight between kids in a high school. This was about power and how it's used or abused. It was about standing up even when no one claps for you. And maybe most importantly, it was about healing without revenge. Kayla never once lost herself to hate, even when it would have been easy. And that's real strength. What really hit me was how she carried the weight of injustice without turning bitter. She trained, she stood up, and she gave others a path to follow. That Still Point group. That wasn't just a club. That was a message. You don't need to be loud to be powerful. You just need to know who you are. So yeah, this story had action drama and even Chuck Norris. But beneath it all, it had heart. It had purpose. I'd love to know what part hit you the hardest. Was it the school fight? The moment Chuck walked in? Or maybe the final line? I don't need a microphone. I just need to keep standing. Drop a comment below. Let's talk about it. And if this story meant something to you, hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And most of all, stay grounded, stay kind, and keep standing tall. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.